All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the White Noise Podcast. My name is James, and I'm joined by my homie, my buddy, Kelvin Franklin.
Hi.
And we got a great show for you guys planned today. Last week, there was not a lot of movie stuff to talk about. This week, there is probably too much movie stuff to talk about. So we got a Matrix 4 trailer that I want to talk about. We got craziness around Slave 1 and Star Wars changing the name and Boba Fett being mad about that. A lot of craziness about that. And then Malignant, James Wan's new horror movie, also came out this week on HBO Max and in theaters, and we both watched that, so we're going to be doing a whole kind of spoiler review, breakdown sort of thing. So we got a great show for you planned. Let's just get into it. All right. So, for starters, I want to talk a little bit about the Matrix 4 trailer. That was big news. What did you think? You've obviously seen the other three Matrix movies, right?
I've seen the first one.
Okay, see, same with me. I've seen the first one, and then I've seen bits and pieces of 2 and 3 and really didn't like it and kind of know generally what happens.
Yeah, I really like this trailer a lot. I think that they really pulled out all the stops in regards to just putting it together as its own piece of art, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, dude, that is such an underrated thing in movies is well-made trailers. It's such a well-made trailer. It doesn't give any of the plot away. It doesn't show too much, but it gets you excited and gives you just enough of a taste for the movie to make you want to go and see it.
Absolutely, and I think unlike Alice Through the Looking Glass, the Disney sequel, this song actually utilized the White Rabbit song beautifully, and I loved how it all came together.
Yeah, it's a cool little reference to the Matrix. I mean, look, I'm putting this far out theory right here so that when it's true, you guys can come back on the internet and believe me. Far out theory, John Wick is really just a simulation of the Matrix, and in this movie, it's going to start as a John Wick movie, and then Morpheus is going to show up. That's my theory.
That would be awesome.
No, but there are lots of, there's a lot of really interesting stuff around it. I'm so happy for Keanu Reeves. I'm super excited. But also, I actually don't know where it's going to go because Lawrence Fishburne doesn't look like he's in the movie, but then there's someone else that kind of looks like a young Lawrence Fishburne, so I don't know if that's just their recasting of him. You know how they do that, where it's this guy is not Morpheus, but he is Morpheus's cousin, and he wears the glasses and is this, or there's a lot of people saying that it might be a prequel. Because... or an alternate universe, because I guess the idea behind, you know how Neo is the One? The One is a recurring glitch in the Matrix code, essentially. So this could be before the Matrix movies that we've seen, or in theory, after the Matrix movies we've seen, as an alternate Neo, kind of. I don't know.
That would be really cool, and I like the idea of it going in sort of a new direction. We don't know, is it a sequel, is it a prequel? Either way, Keanu Reeves' character seems to be out of this world, and normally I don't like the whole we're bringing you back to this world sort of thing, but here I think it could really work well.
Well, yeah, what would you want to see, right? So that I agree. I don't like rebooting for the sake of rebooting, and I was very, very nervous about this because 2 and 3, from the bits I've seen, were not the best movies in the world, and especially because 1 set the bar so high. 1 is such a good movie. And so I was really oh, we're doing another Matrix? Okay. So what angle do you want to see? I don't know what they're going to do, but I don't want just a basic, all right, this is the Star Wars sequel trilogy. So what do you want to see? If you could choose, do you want it to be a prequel or an alternate universe, or?
I would more want it to honestly be, of the two, I'd choose a prequel or a sequel that's actually has something to say. I don't mean politically, but just story-wise, that is able to develop a story.
Yeah, not
and
just
bring
a
the
sequel
world,
for money.
Yeah, bring the world more to a broader scale. I always like sequels that are able to do that. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is my favorite example. That movie is fantastic because it built what that was already built in the world and expanded it in ways we didn't know, and was super detailed and super empathetic in the way that it came about that, and really brought the world into a bigger expansion. And that's what I want with the Matrix, hopefully.
Yeah, I feel like some version of a sequel possibly. I don't know. I'm interested. I'm interested to see how it goes. I also think it could be one of those situations where everybody watching the trailer is like really overthinking it, and it's just going to be a straight sequel. Like, you saw WandaVision, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you remember how everybody was like, "Oh, it's secretly Mephisto and whatever," and everybody was like overthinking it, and they're like, "Guys, calm down. Like, you're really overthinking this." I wonder, there's a part of me that wonders if this is a little bit of a case of that, but
Oh, for sure. And I remember when Paul Bettany was talking about WandaVision, and he had the interview about the ending, and he's like, "Oh yeah, so spoiler for WandaVision. Sorry if you haven't seen it." And he's like, "Oh well, something's gonna happen in the end." And then he knew that he was only fighting himself, and he's like, "Well, I really can't backtrack now. Everyone's already taken this to a different level and thinks it's gonna be something grand, but really it's just me, and I don't want to disappoint them, so I'm gonna keep my mouth shut." And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess. Yeah, you're in the corner there."
I don't even blame the actors. It's like that show had such a crazy internet hyper focus. It was insane. Yeah, so I don't know, dude. I am generally very excited for The Matrix. It looks really good. Everybody, do you know the actress who plays Trinity? What's her name? I'm blanking.
I am too. I just saw it the other day.
But
too,
either way, I the worry for me at least when you're bringing these people back is like, look, these people are a lot older, and like everybody looks really good. Like Trinity looks great. Keanu just doesn't age, so that's fine. But you know what I mean? Like I was surprised. Like everybody looks good. Like this isn't kind of like, oh, what happened to you over the last 15 years? So that's cool. I'm very excited. But yeah, moving on. Have you heard about any of this Slave One Boba Fett drama?
No, what happened?
Okay, so let me break this down. So before I get into this, I will be completely transparent. I am a gigantic Boba Fett fan. I am a diehard Boba Fett fan. I love the man like a child. I don't want Disney to screw with that character. His episode in The Mandalorian was The Mandalorian is a solid show. It's not it's not a Breaking Bad in my head. That's just my opinion. But that episode of The Mandalorian is one of the coolest episodes ever. It just stands alone as this great action sequence. And as a Boba Fett fan, you want to see Boba Fett in action. You want to see him fight. It's iconic. So a while back, they were releasing the toy sets, and something came out about his ship not being called Slave One. And it was just called Boba Fett's ship. And a bunch of Star Wars fans were like, what the heck is this? This is so ridiculous. Like, blah, blah, blah. They kind of freaked out about it. And then I think Hasbro, who does the Lego sets, was like, no, don't worry. This is just what we do because, parents will come and buy the sets and they don't know the name of his ship. So we just call it Boba Fett's ship and keep it simple. And so everybody's like, okay, all right, cool. Then that's not an issue. And then recently, I think this last week, it seems like it has been officially confirmed that Star Wars is changing the name of Boba Fett's ship from Slave One to Fire Spray. Right?
Interesting.
So, look, obviously there is a hot button element to this issue, but, and I want your opinion, because I may just be biased as a Boba Fett fan, but it seems crazy to me that, obviously slavery is wrong. Slavery is a bad thing. But does that mean that the word now needs to be deleted from the English language?
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic because I found, especially in the last couple of years, there are certain things either with sports teams like the Redskins or even in housing now, we have to change our bathrooms. We can't call them the master bathroom anymore. We have a different name for it. And so there are interesting situations where we have to change the diction of certain things.
Of course. So the Redskins thing, I totally get that. There are situations where I understand it, okay, the extreme situations. But to me, this, and also Redskins, I think, I don't even want to say it, in context is very obvious, right? Whereas with this, it's like, this is Star Wars. This is a spaceship. This is in no way referencing anything else, really. I think it's just the name of a spaceship. It's an iconic spaceship. And I just think it's a little bit silly to say that you're not allowed to say something like that. There's a quote that Dumbledore says in the first Harry Potter book, not to get too, and movie, where he says that, because nobody wants to say the word Voldemort. They just say he who will not be named. And he says something about, by not saying this name, you give it fear and you give it more power than it has. And to me, this kind of feels like a situation like that, where it's like, look, I may be wrong, but I just can't imagine anybody being seriously offended by that or anything like that. because it's so clearly not in that context. And I really don't think just because slavery is a bad thing and there were abuses of slavery both in America but throughout the world, and sadly continue throughout the world, it doesn't mean you can't use that word.
Yeah, I believe that in this certain case, it was something that obviously didn't start out with that context. It's a toy. It's Star Wars. We all know it. But at the same time, the way culture works is like, oh, let's change it. But at the same time, I don't think we should. I get why they did. I understand with a certain pocket of people who are like, okay, like we need to change it for this, that reason. I get it societally, but at the same time, should we really censor everything? I mean,
well, that's the thing. Like, am I being crazy and thinking that this is a different sort of situation than something like the Redskins? Like, because I want to be fair about it, and so I guess if you guys want to comment or whatever, but it just, in me thinking, it feels like a completely different situation.
I think in the context, the main reason it is in this situation is because it is a toy and it is aimed for children. So it's a bit more.
Well, I mean, it's a ship in a movie and stuff too.
Exactly, but I mean the way that the situation is, it's marketed for children as a toy. It's not necessarily something on the broad spectrum as far as like adult maturity goes. So I get the upheaval, but I'm also like, there's no congruent need to actually mandate to change it as far as right now goes, because it's in part of the canon for years.
And I feel like it's not. I have a hard time seeing that, having a ship be called Slave One or something like that is going to, in any way, take away from the horrible things that happened due to slavery, and in any way, make somebody more likely to have slaves or something because Boba Fett's ship is named Slave One. Like, that's a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah, there's no direct correlation, and I think a good example of that, and I bring it up now, is with, I remember when Django Unchained came out, and I personally love the movie. I think it's fantastic, and Quentin Tarantino directed it and everything, and some people loved it, and some people were like, oh, I'm offended by this, rightly so, in different contexts. Art is subjective, we all know that, but at the same time, that begs a question, like we talk about all the time, artists should be able to create art under any circumstances. It doesn't matter who you are, how you are. If you have a story to tell and you have the wherewithal to tell it to the best of your ability. And we shouldn't be censoring everything in context just because it referenced something beforehand.
Yeah, and also, like, let's be real. Boba Fett is not a good guy. Like, he's a cool character, but, like, he's not a good guy. He's a bounty hunter. And everybody knows that. To me, it would be likened to, like, if we're going to do that, then it's like, okay, then we can't root for John Wick because he's a murderer. And, you can't like Dexter because he's a serial killer. And you can't like Hannibal Lecter because he's a serial killer. Like, if we're going to do that, then we should do it about everything. But since we're not, and we're so clearly not, then I feel like we shouldn't do it about this.
Agreed. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was at Horror Nights last night, and they have the Terror Tram, and I really liked it. I thought it was fun. But, of course, their whole MO for promoting The Purge is it's violent. So they have a whole spiel and everything. They're like, oh, this is The Purge. This is a new America, this and that, the other. And they have a whole spiel about how the purgers are out there taking people out. And so, yeah, you have that context. That's part of art, whether you like it or not. Part of art is exploring the horrors of society. And so you can't just censor everything and be like, oh, we're not going to put this out because this or that, or it might offend somebody. Because chances are everything's going to someone's gonna be offended by anything pretty much. So you got to keep it open and open your mind to be like, well, there's certain instances like this where it's like it shouldn't be as big a deal as it is.
Yeah, and I mean, not to get too broad, I promise we'll get back to entertainment, but I do think that, because it seems silly, people are like, dude, it's just the name of a ship, it's Slave One, just change it, okay? If somebody's offended by it, change it. But to me, what I think it is it is, obviously I'm just a fan, but I do think as a society, as America, whatever you want to say, label it as, but as a society, I guess, as a group of people, as consumers, we need to be aware of the ability to be able to talk about things. And we can, of course. And there are things that as culture changes, you're like, okay, maybe we shouldn't call the team the Redskins, right? Totally understandable. But I think on the other end of the spectrum, we need to be very careful about you don't want to just have a society where everything has to be clean and glossy and you have to hide everything. Because with that, then you start approaching the point where nobody can bring up any new ideas at all. And when that happens, no growth happens. The growth that got you to where you are, that never happens anymore. So you need, however small of a sliver, you need that place for new ideas and things that you don't like, that are revolutionary, that repulse you, that make you angry. Those things need to have a place in society, and we need to be able to talk about it and really be like, okay, guys, let's look at this and let's analyze this. Because, and I know this sounds silly that we're talking about a Star Wars show, but I really do believe it is a bigger issue a little bit than that. Of we need to be able to have things, and we need to be able to weigh, like, okay, if there's one person uncomfortable with this, but we don't want to start this trend of just like deleting anything because one person is uncomfortable with it, maybe we should be okay with that, because 99% people are okay with this, and this one person is maybe a little bit not okay with it.
Yeah, you definitely should have that freedom and that right. And I think that in society, we definitely should keep that mindset and continue to make art, however provocative, or even if something is from the past, it doesn't necessarily need to be rewritten all the time. We can keep it how it is and just know the context and know where the line is drawn to not take things a certain way. And
also, like, to make fun of myself a little bit here, it's like, dude, I agree with you, like, this was out of time, but it's like, dude, it's a spaceship and it's called Slave One. Like, we are all taking this way too seriously. It's called Slave One, leave the name. I really don't think it's like this giant, super serious issue. And look, maybe, there's another part of me, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get canceled because I'm not being sensitive enough. But it's like, I really don't think so. I don't.
Yeah, I think it's part of canon. And if you look back in Star Wars, there's a whole history there. Any franchise, there's a whole history of things that you could find in any amalgamation. Some things that may not be okay today, but you know what? That's all right, because it's part of the storytelling. The context is different. That's the whole thing about world building, is you pull from things you know. Nothing is genuinely original. Everything's pulled from something else, right? So in that, you have instances where there are crossovers and there are things that may be taken out of context, but ultimately it's not the detriment of society to just cancel everything, because then you don't have any new ideas. You're right.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too that Tamora Morrison, the actor of Boba Fett, came out and was like, I don't agree with this. This is dumb. Which is gutsy on his part, because, it's kind of a blatant disagreement with Big Daddy Disney.
Hey, I love anytime.
I like Tamora Morrison. Recently, he feels like such a cool dude.
He's fantastic, and I love any time that actors or actresses are able to step out of the comfort zone and be like, "No, this is wrong." Like when Dave Bautista did it for James Gunn.
Yep.
And certain instances where they're like, "No, this is wrong. We need to fix this. It's not about me just stroking the ego of a company, but being like, morally, this is wrong. We need to stand up for this."
Yeah. Yeah. So that's that. Obviously, I'm totally down for discussion. So throw whatever your thoughts wherever you're watching or listening to this too. I do want to kind of like, it's a discussion. It's an interesting kind of broader discussion. I really think in that specific situation, we're taking this way too seriously. But yeah, so finally, kind of our final segment going on here. Malignant came out. It's a horror movie. If you haven't heard about it, I say we do like a real quick non-spoiler review, because I think it was a little bit, there wasn't a ton of hype around it. So it was a James Wan horror movie. He's the guy who directed The Conjuring 1 and 2. He directed Aquaman. He directed Saw. He's just an icon. Insidious. He's an icon in the horror industry. I really like him. I think he's a good director, a very good director. Malignant, the movie came out. It's on HBO Max, and it's in theaters. What did you think, real quick, like spoiler-free review, in case somebody's listening to this who hasn't seen it? Like, is it worth seeing? What did you think?
I really enjoyed it. I'm going to be honest with you. I thought it was super refreshing to kind of see some of the things and ideas that James Wan went for. I think that ultimately it really was a slow burn, but I love that about his movies. He's unapologetic to be like, this is my story, I'm going to tell it, and you're going to either enjoy it or you're not. And I like some of the aspects he took, without getting into spoilers, about certain scientific things that he chose to address, and just the way that certain we talk about serial killers, but the way that people can be interpreted by that, or the way that people see it, and I like some of the avenues he took. I thought it was super creative the way that he kind of melded the story together. I'll be honest with you, for the first half hour, I had no idea what the hell was going on, but then I slowly got it over time, and by the end, of course, it all made sense. But I thought it was kind of bold the way that he went after certain things in this movie that we haven't seen in a very long time or haven't been explored in this way. And it's one of those things like we talk about. Sometimes you build an icon by not building an icon. And I think that's a cool thing that he was able to do here without getting into spoilers. He really was unapologetic of like, here's what I want to do. Here's how this thing it leads to this and how it all can connect together.
So sorry about that, a little bit of a technical hiccup. But yeah, I agree completely with everything that you're saying. It was just a solid horror movie. James Wan's directing is always really good, and so it takes it from kind of like your standard basic boring jump scares to like a really dynamic cinematic experience. Soundtrack was great. It really gave me Saw vibes. Like the original Saw. I liked that. The acting was just amazing all around. The story was a solid story. It wasn't like the most mind-blowing thing in the world. I don't want to say too much about it, but I definitely think it's worth watching. I would say more on HBO Max than in theaters, but I think it's definitely worth a watch if you like horror movies. But yeah, to get into some serious, deep spoiler territory, let's break this movie down. Holy, the reveal was a lot.
Yeah.
It lost me a little bit there. I liked the movie. I really liked the beginning. It felt like a crime thriller meets a horror movie, and I freaking loved that. That was so cool.
Yeah, the first 5 minutes were fantastic, and I was like, what the hell are we doing? Why are we here? What is this creature? What does this all mean? And sometimes, what's I love about James Wan, it's like, we've talked about it before, but sometimes with horror movies, where like with Mother, for example, they'll show you a clue to what's going on, but I hate when horror movies do that, because then you just piece it together an hour later, and like, well, you shouldn't have shown me the first 5 minutes, because I know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's
This
true.
is one of those instances where I didn't get it, and I didn't put it together, and I like that he did it cleverly that way, instead of being like, here's the pseudo reveal in the beginning and then you'll see more later.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the one thing though that I would say a little bit against that is I think that the reveal, I don't know, maybe it's just me, the reveal kind of took me out of it. It seemed like he came up with this really cool idea like for the first hour, and then he's kind of known for his reveals, especially if I don't know, have you seen Dead Silence? But Dead Silence, there's a reveal.
Yeah.
Right. So he's kind of known for that. And so he's like, I want a cool reveal. And then he like was just trying to think of something that would like trick you and was surprising as opposed to something that really worked for the plot. And I kind of got those vibes. And it's not bad. It's just, it felt a little bit more like, see, I tricked you, as opposed to like, oh, like you really get that click catharsis when something really works as a twist or a reveal, and you're like, oh my gosh, it wasn't quite there for me. It was solid, but it wasn't quite there for me. Now, I still loved it because, dude, the way this man directs his movies is amazing. Okay, the directing of this movie, there was a shot, and I don't know if you guys remember this, if you've seen the movie, where it was an above shot, and she's running through the house, and then she goes upstairs in the house, and it's just tracking her through the rooms, like the camera's filming a model of a house or something. That was so cool. Like his directing makes any movie go from like a 5 to an 8 immediately.
Oh, for sure. I love that shot where she's running through the house, and then I love the one take shot in the police station where she's taking out all those people. I was impressed by that one.
It got me kind of psyched for Aquaman too, not gonna lie.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And I think if he has a more creative control this time around, I think he can really do much more with that. But that's a different topic. I still loved his direction in this movie and the things he did with certain elements of the, or in spoilers, of Gabriel, and how just everything from the look, the design, to how it looked like her, but I didn't piece that together till later. I didn't really think of that.
You would see the way Gabriel moved, and you're like, it looks weird, like it's like backwards or something, and then you're like, oh my gosh, it is back. Like, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and the way that they were able to kind of make it sort of an enigmatic character as far as the first hour goes, I loved.
Yeah, that was interesting. I feel like the biggest, just the end felt a little bit rushed to me, and I really liked the sister character, the adopted sister character. But I feel like they tried to have a bit of an arc with them that didn't really click with me. Where at the end, where she was like, "You are my sister and you are my blood," and I was like, "Oh, okay." And that came a little bit out of nowhere for me. Which is frustrating because I really liked her character. And then I got like really weirded out because then just randomly at the end when they're having the fight, they were like, "Oh, and he ate your babies," and I was like, "What? Like what?" So I don't know. That just took me by surprise.
Yeah, I that one I kind of got, but I was confused as to like in the hospital. I thought the sister got shot in the head, and then she was suddenly alive again, and I was like, "What the hell?"
I think what it was is that she was doing the same thing that he did to her. You know how he like put her in a mental prison and made her feel like she was somewhere else, where in reality she was really killing these people.
Yeah,
I think it was an equivalent. Like I think the whole thing was like, oh, we share the same brain. So if you can do that to me, I can do that to you. And so she like flipped it on him and had him think that he killed her, but he didn't really kill her.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I think it was a solid movie. Like, I don't mean to sound super critical or anything. Like, obviously, I'm gonna just point out things that I wasn't okay with. But as like an overview, despite those faults, I still think it was a solid horror movie. And like I said, I really think that James Wan directing these movies, like, I think if anybody else directed it, it would be like a 5 for me. But because James Wan directed it and the way he directs these movies, it is so dynamic. Like, and I've seen all these different horror directors, and I watch a lot of horror because of the Reaction Channel. And then I hadn't seen James Wan in a bit, and I was like, okay, I wonder how he's going to hold up now that I've seen a lot of horror. And I come back to it, and I'm like, dude, the guy is a master director. He's so dynamic, and I can't get over it. And so I think really it elevates everything that he does.
Definitely. He's very attention to detail based, and he knows his stuff. He's very clever. He makes you work for it, and I appreciate that. He's not one of these directors that just throws jump scares in your face to scare you. He actually wants to tell a good story.
And his cinematography, like, he was really messing with you with the horror. Like, do you remember the old guy who gets killed?
Yes.
Right across from the hotel. The way they did that whole scene with the tension was so well done, where he goes into the closet and it's all dark and you don't hear anything, and they just turns on the light. Like, there's a few moments where the tension, which I think really is what makes a good horror movie, is your balance between tension and scares. I think in this movie, you know, even though the plot and different points like that you could have issues with, the way that he did some of the tension and the scares, and the way he would do like this many beats of tension and then a scare and then a scare and then tension, the way he varied that was just amazing. Like, the guy's a master at horror. He knows the genre so well.
Yeah, he really does, and he's so varietal, and I loved his featurette on the movie. He said that he always likes to do something.
I didn't know that. I didn't know he had a featurette.
He's talking about how with Malignant he wanted to do something a bit different, and he's like, for the genre you have to keep doing different things, otherwise you're gonna fall into the same trap and just do the same stuff. But he's like, I wanted to take this in a different direction, and he did. We've seen the twin thing before, but not like this, and I was super, at least scientifically, I was super impressed. Yeah, not every explanation was fantastic, but you know, it's only 2 hours long, so you only have so much time. Yeah. But the way that it all came together with the twin and the fetus and how they controlled each other, we've seen elements of that, but not in this way. And I love the whole murder mystery part, but it was so contained. I like that. It wasn't broad like some movies try and blow it out of proportion and take it other places and start a franchise like, oh, crime after crime. But no, this one was so contained, and I love the way that he pulled that off, where she sees the murders that he does, and then they're wondering why all these killings are happening and blame it on her. And I thought that was all that part. I love that whole plot line.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, so it was a good movie. I enjoy. I mean, dude, like, to zoom out a little bit, I guess, and move on from Malignant, he is legitimately one of the best horror directors, like, of all time, I think. And I know that's a bold statement, but think about it for a second. Like, he has done so many horror movies, and he's done so many iconic industry genre-changing horror movies. And I can't think of a director who has consistently done that that's better in horror. Like, Mike Flanagan is a really good horror director, but he hasn't done as many successful things as James Wan. So I think he's still a runner-up. And even people like John Carpenter doesn't have nearly as many like smash hit genre-changing horror movies. Like, the Conjuring movies and the Saw movies are some of the biggest horror titles of all time, and both of those came from James Wan. And Insidious. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, all three of those were started by him, yeah.
So, like, this guy's crazy.
Definitely, but I love that about him. He has such a cool mind, and just he goes places with his films, and I think that he always, like he said, he always tries to push the envelope and do something new, and I always appreciate that. As far as we talk about artists trying to create new things for genres and genre bend and different things, and I love that he has the audacity to do that, not just keep it one note. Or fall into the trap of a style and keep it that way, because directors do that too, where they'll have one style and that's all you see from them, and they don't really branch out. But he does a lot of branching out in his movies.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Aquaman was good. It wasn't great, and that's why I'm really excited for Aquaman 2 because, who's the director of Black Panther?
Ryan Coogler.
Brian Coogler. Okay,
Ryan Coogler, yeah.
It reminded me a little bit of Ryan Coogler, where Ryan Coogler is a really good director, and he directed Creed, and it was a great movie. But you could tell that when he did Black Panther, he was a little bit out of his element, and he was still adjusting. Mm-hmm. I got a little bit of those kind of vibes from Aquaman. Not as much, but I got a little bit. Like, he still had some really cool directed scenes, but I got a little bit of a feeling it's like, okay, he's still finding his footing in, a huge, big budget superhero action movie. So I'm hoping, that he just felt a little bit uncomfortable, if that makes sense. Like, I got a little bit of a feeling. Whereas I'm hoping in the sequel, I'm really excited for it because I think he's going to be a little bit more comfortable, and he's going to probably have more creative freedom too because the first one was so successful. And so I'm very excited to kind of see him come into his own as an action superhero director in Aquaman 2.
Absolutely, and he's got a good cast, good group of people.
I mean, besides Amber Heard, but we don't want to talk about that.
Yeah. But I mean, Patrick Wilson looks great, who he's worked with before. And I will say, they poke fun a little bit at the whole psychic police thing, which they referenced in Conjuring 3 and did a little bit of that. I personally am so glad that he took this project on versus Conjuring 3 because I feel like, while that was good and I liked it and the director did a great job with it, I feel like I would much rather have him do this original project and keep going this direction.
I agree. Now, do you know if he's going to be at all involved in the monster universe? Because Lee Wynell is involved in the monster universe, and I saw Invisible Man about a month ago, and that was great. And Lee Wynell has come into his own as a director. They work together, right? They work together on Saw. They work together on a bunch of their projects. Do you think that there's a chance that James Wan is going to come into the monster universe?
I certainly hope so.
Because if he does, I am gonna lose it. I forget about Marvel, forget about DC. If it's Lee Wynell and James Wan working together on a monster cinematic horror universe, I will lose my mind.
I would love that, and I think that as long as that's the thing is I would love him to do that, and he would change the whole game for them as Lee Wynell has with Invisible Man. I'll speak on that in a second, but as far as the Monsterverse goes, I want him to do that, but I would also want him to continue his small projects too.
Of course. I think the key to make the monster universe, at least for me, obviously different people will like it, is that it will stay horror. Because the one thing I really liked about Invisible Man is that it was horror. It wasn't an action movie. It was action horror, I guess, but it was still horror. And I think that the way to keep the monster movie unique and not just like a rip-off MCU is to have it be this weird kind of horror connected universe.
Yeah, for sure. And I really was not expecting much at all from The Invisible Man, and I ended up loving the hell. That's the one movie the last 3 years I've seen that literally scared the shit out of me, and I couldn't sleep. I'm not even kidding. That movie scared the living shit out of me, just because it's based in reality. It's based off an abusive relationship, and the horrors of what's coming next, and how she dealt with that, and the whole horror of her life, and how she had to break free, and it was so psychological, and I love that Lee Wynell went there. Even that everyone's controversial about it, but the scene in the restaurant, I still forget plausibility for a minute. I was shocked as hell. I guess you could pick it apart, but generally speaking, that entire progression from the beginning until the very end when they're at the dinner, I was on the edge of my damn seat, and I could not look away.
Yeah, it was so well done. And the way the cinematography would just sit on the empty... I mean, everybody said this already, but the way it would sit on empty spaces and different things like that. Just expertly well done. So, yeah, I guess we had a good, nice, busy week in movies. Go ahead and check out Malignant just to support our boy James Wan, honestly. But I actually think it's a good horror movie. It's definitely worth seeing. Join in on these topics. Like I like kind of having these discussions with everybody. So feel free to comment or join in. We got a little serious in this episode about a few things. So feel free to kind of weigh in on those and throw your thoughts in the comments. But yeah, thank you for listening or watching, whatever you're doing. You guys are the best, and we will see you all next week.